You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 94. Can you avoid cancer? Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hey, welcome to the podcast. How are you? I hope everything is going great for you. How's your behavior design coming along? Learning how to install and delete habits like a ninja will up-level your health and your life. Come on over to my website, healthcouragecollective.com, to be part of a community of forward-thinking women who are ready to design their behaviors, which will determine their future. Today, we're going to talk about whether you can avoid cancer. Of course, none of us can know what's in our future. We might do everything, quote, right, and still get cancer. Who knows? And I definitely don't want to diminish the experience of anyone who has had to go through the heartbreak and bravery that are required when you or a loved one has cancer, or say that anyone should be blamed for acquiring a cancer diagnosis. That's retarded. But looking forward, is there anything that you can be doing now to decrease your chances of getting cancer in the future? I want you to keep listening for the answer, but here's a spoiler alert. Mute the next 3 seconds if you don't want to know. The answer is yes. Heck yes, as we say in Utah. What do you think about when you think about cancer? An incurable disease? The most horrible thing that could ever happen to you? A death sentence? What about cancer patients? Bald? Weak? Might die if you breathe in their general direction? How about cancer treatment? Causes intractable vomiting, mucositis, destroys your immune system, almost kills you before the cancer can, toxic to your body and your life savings, bankruptcy-inducing. It's pretty normal to think of the cancer experience this way. I hope you don't personally know anyone who has had to suffer that way, but chances are that you probably do. But we also see it on TV and in movies and GoFundMes and YouTube videos. It's kind of normalized. When we think of cancer, we think of the stereotypical ultra-fragile patient. We think of battling cancer as fighting a war against an army of ultra-powerful, immortal supercells that have gone rogue. That's a scary proposition. Half of the U.S. population is affected by cancer in some way. 1,600 cancer patients die in the U.S. every single day. New cancer rates have steadily increased over the last 150 years. Half of all men and a third of all women in the U.S. are projected to develop cancer in their lifetime. On December 23, 1971, Richard Nixon declared war on cancer, and cancer rates have not improved at all since then. We knew that cancer was caused by DNA damage, and all we needed was to figure out how to better understand our DNA, and cancer would be a disease for the history books, like consumption or dropsy. In 2001, the human genome was partially sequenced. I was in pharmacy school then, and I remember it was a big deal. That was going to solve the cancer conundrum. 22 years later, we know that it didn't. Why not? We know we have these sequential DNA mutations that cause cell machinery to become defective and start replicating cells too rapidly. So why can't we just find the genetic mutations and stop the madness? Cancer is complicated. I'm not saying it's not, and I'm not any kind of oncological expert. I don't even think that's how you would describe someone who is. But I do think it's important for you to know that the traditionally accepted theory of what causes cancer isn't the only theory. It's called the somatic mutation theory, and I wholeheartedly believe that it's wrong. It's up to you to decide what you believe. There is another theory of what causes cancer called the metabolic theory, and it's not some newfangled Gen Y idea. It started with an eccentric but brilliant German scientist named Otto Warburg, who discovered in 1924 that cancer cells have a weird method of generating energy. Instead of having their mitochondria create ATP from glucose and oxygen, they convert glucose into energy without the presence of oxygen, called anaerobic metabolism or fermentation. Otto Warburg postulated that this metabolic dysfunction was the origin of cancer. In 1924. Do you remember which cellular organelle produces ATP for energy? Yes, you're so smart, your mitochondria. Remember from episode 90 that metabolic health is mitochondrial health and metabolic dysfunction is mitochondrial dysfunction? Otto Warburg, who showed that cancer is a disease of impaired metabolism, won the Nobel Prize in 1931. If you want to learn more about the history of scientific discovery and ignoration? What's the proper context for the past tense ignore that matches with discovery? Discovery and ignority. Ignoring of. Okay, I think I got it. If you want to learn more about the history of scientific discovery and ignoring of some discoveries, I highly recommend the book Tripping Over the Truth by Travis Christofferson. It's a good one for really telling the story of the research and the politics, I guess you would say, of getting ideas recognized and funded and available to the population at large. Otto Warburg sounds like kind of a character, but a really smart character. His discovery about cancer cell metabolism was almost totally forgotten, but a scientist named Peter Pedersen took up the torch, and since then, some awesome doctors and researchers like Thomas Seyfried and Nasha Winters have recognized how to help patients based on these theories. Most of the information in this episode comes from Nasha Winters' great book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. I highly recommend it if you or anyone you love is affected by cancer, or if you just want to avoid it. I think you have a really good chance of getting yourself into the sadly shrinking group of people who will not develop cancer in their lifetime. Nothing's a guarantee, of course, but we have way more control than we're led to believe, and I think this should be part of your aging plan. Most people will acknowledge that your lifestyle choices have a small effect on the development of some cancers. Like, they know you're far more likely to get lung cancer if you smoke, right? But we're largely told that cancer is a combination of genetics and bad luck, neither of which you can do anything about. But actually, research shows that only 5 to 10% of cancers are caused by damaged DNA. 90 to 95% are not. I like Nasha Winters' definition of cancer, which is, cancer is a disease of genes mismatched with modern lifestyle. And also, cancer is about how our bodies and minds interact with the environment. The book Tripping Over the Truth does a really good job of describing the commonly accepted theory of cancer, the somatic theory of cancer, and how it got its start. Chromosomes were discovered in cells in 1882, and researchers were all gung-ho about DNA when Watson and Crick figured out that it's a double helix in 1953. When researchers looked at cancer cells under a microscope, the chromosomes were a mess. And we know DNA is the instruction manual for cells, so it made sense that they thought for sure that gene mutations are the original cause of cancer. Plus, we know that some known carcinogens like radiation cause DNA mutations. So time has marched on with everyone, or almost everyone, holding tight to the somatic theory of cancer. And over time, more and more gene mutations have been discovered, and the picture of cancer has gotten increasingly more complex. Rather than coming closer to finding a cause or a cure, we seem to be getting farther away. Cancer is now known to be 200 to 300 different distinct diseases with different mutations, different causes, and different treatments. Along the way, Otto Warburg's theory was forgotten, dismissed, or silenced, depending on how pessimistic you are. The main point of the metabolic approach to cancer is that cancer isn't 200 to 300 different diseases, but a single disease of energy metabolism. No matter the location of the tumor or what DNA anomalies might exist in the cells, all cancers use fermentation, aka anaerobic respiration, aka the Warburg effect, to generate energy. This dysfunction of energy production is common in all cancers. And it's something we can do something about. For real. Hey, have you ever thought about buying an Oura ring? If you have, then you know that you can track your activity, recovery, and sleep with a light and unobtrusive ring that looks like a normal ring. I've had mine for almost 3 years and I absolutely love it. I check my numbers every single day and it helps me make better decisions. You can see real metrics that show the detrimental effects of eating too late or working out too hard too often, and the beneficial effects of balanced activity and turning off screens before bed. If you're a curious person who wants to see how much deep sleep you got, which is critical for muscle building, the Oura Ring can tell you whether you get the 75 to 90 plus minutes that you need for that. If you want to see if you got enough REM for emotional resilience, memory consolidation, and neurotransmitter production, your Oura Ring can tell you whether you got the 2+ hours that you need for that. I pay special attention to my HRV, which shows me how stressed my body is, and I always check my steps every day to make sure I've gotten enough non-exercise movement throughout the day. You can quickly check your heart rate, track your cycle. It connects the dots and knows why your basal body temperature increases for a day or two and uses that to predict your next period start date. You can see your sleep efficiency, which is a high leverage thing you can optimize for, and tag for things you might want to track like caffeine, fasting, sauna, melatonin, headaches, whatever. And it gives you monthly and quarterly reports. If getting more health data from an easy wearable has been on your mind, now might be the time to act. I have a link in the show notes that will get you $50 off. They make it super easy to find your perfect size and get started right away. Okay, back to the episode. You've probably heard before that we all have cancer cells inside of us. It's just a matter of whether we get to a tipping point where those cells can get enough momentum to start going crazy and cause noticeable effects. If they don't, our immune system can get rid of them. Most cancers take years or at least months to develop. They're flying under the radar for quite a while at first. But our mitochondrial damage is flying under the radar for way longer before we start developing any cancerous cells. We are capable of creating energy to power our cells through both aerobic and anaerobic respiration, so that if we're ever in a position to need energy when we can't get enough oxygen, like we're running away from a dingo or doing Fran, that's a CrossFit workout in case you're like, what? And we can still generate a burst of power to get away. As you probably remember from Fran or your last dingo chase or whatever you're into, my youngest son has become obsessed with pogo sticking lately and it makes him sore. So when you generate energy anaerobically, there's a byproduct called lactic acid. That's why you can't sit down on the toilet seat for 2 days after a tough anaerobic leg workout. That's all part of normal adaptation. But when mitochondria are damaged, weird things start to happen. One of those weird things could be that the mitochondria in the cell might go the anaerobic route, which creates 2 ATP per molecule of glucose, instead of normal aerobic metabolism, which creates 38 ATP per molecule of glucose. That never happens when there's enough oxygen available because it's weird and less efficient, but it allows cells with tons of glucose available to them to produce those 2 little ATPs per glucose over and over and over really quickly, allowing them to replicate quickly. If you remember, anaerobic respiration also produces lactic acid as a byproduct. An acidic environment promotes angiogenesis, which we talked about back in episode 34. Remember, it's the formation of new blood vessels. Something an aspiring tumor really needs is a good blood supply. The impaired mitochondria with an abundance of available glucose are well equipped to run anaerobic respiration even when oxygen is available, which helps the cells develop into cancer. But they need to use a lot of glucose because they're only getting 2 ATPs per glucose instead of 38. That would be like driving a 1973 Lincoln Continental instead of a Prius. You'd need a lot of readily available fuel and you'd be sucking it down like gangbusters. One of the best ways to diagnose certain cancers is by positron emission tomography or PET scan. Before a PET scan, you get an injection of radioactive sugar, and the ravenous consumption of sugar is what shows the radiologist where the cancer is. Nasha Winters says 80% of human cancers are driven by glucose and insulin. That's a lot, but it's not every single kind of cancer, which is important to be aware of because the only kind of cancers that matters to you is the kind of cancer you or a loved one has, right? There's a 20% chance that it won't be entirely driven by sugar, but most cancer cells ingest sugar 50 times faster than healthy cells. 50 times. One way that they do this is by creating more insulin receptors on their surfaces than healthy cells have, allowing more glucose to enter. Breast cancer cells have been found to have 3 times more insulin receptors than healthy cells, colon cancer cells 2 times as many. Reprogramming the mitochondria to consume glucose faster than oxygen is available is what allows the cancer cells to reproduce so rapidly. Glucose and insulin stimulate proliferation and migration of all types of cancer. So ingesting any type of sugar, glucose, sucrose, fructose, honey, orange juice, agave, white bread, it all feeds cancer and reduces the function of some immune cells by half for up to 5 hours. Whether you have cancer or not, you do not want to reduce the function of your immune cells by half. A typical American kid eats more sugar in one day than one of our ancestors could possibly have eaten in 2 years. And guess who loves that fact even more than PepsiCo or Hershey's or Smuckers? Yeah, cancer cells. Sugar is their favorite food, and it's what allows them to rapidly grow, reproduce, and invade. And here's something important Nasha Winters says in her book. No conventional treatment can affect cancer cells if sugar consumption remains high. Period. End quote. That's so important. 100% of cancer cells reprogram their metabolism to anaerobically make energy from glucose. If we forget about the fact that it's insane to ignore that as the most logical inroad for effective treatment, anyone's conventional cancer subtype specific treatment, usually chemo or radiation, is completely ineffective if sugar consumption remains high. Sugar. It's a good thing if you're a cancer cell looking to expand your empire. If you remember the "it's a good thing" Queen Martha Stewart's jail sentence was for insider trading of stocks in the company that made Erbitux. It's spelled Erbitux, but I always wished it were spelled with an H because then Martha would have pronounced it Herbitux. Do you remember how she always called herbs herbs? Anyway, it turns out that Erbitux's success in cancer treatment only came by its ability to make patients lose their appetite. So it seems like a super hairy guy in a tank top named Avocado could also be an anti-cancer drug by making you lose your appetite. There are way too many problems with current cancer treatments to even go there in this episode, but one of them is that in order to be approved as a cancer drug, most of which cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, you need to shrink a tumor by 50% for 28 days. No actual effect on the cancerous condition is required. Prolongation of life isn't even considered. Quality of life isn't a factor at all, just shrinking a tumor in 28 days. Other problems, of course, include the decimation of the patient's health and immune function by most treatments. If you can survive cancer treatment, your brain's blood flow and metabolism will likely be impaired for 10 years or more, and you're more likely to die earlier and with a lower quality of life. If you don't have an autoimmune condition before you get treated for cancer, you're pretty likely to get one afterward. Conventional cancer treatments cause increased risk for leaky gut, cardiovascular disease, cognitive impairment, and neuropathy. According to the National Cancer Institute, $6.5 billion with a B was spent on cancer research in 2022. According to Dr. Nasha Winters, 95% of cancer spending is allocated to genetic research and 5% to prevention. That seems about par for the course in this country, unfortunately. Western medicine is all about identifying the genetic mutation that causes a pinpoint mechanism in one specific type of cancer so they can develop a drug to affect that one mechanism. The average cost of a new cancer drug is $100,000 a year. 40% of cancer patients deplete their life savings in order to pay for their treatment. 30% of cancer patients, in addition to dealing with having cancer, also deal with debt collectors hounding them about medical bills. That is horrible. We should be ashamed. I think I've mentioned before that I got this really cool indoor garden for Christmas, not this past year, but the year before. I love it. It has spots for 27 plants to grow, and it's really cute. Even though I totally love it and have been perfecting my process for over a year now, I don't have everything quite flawless yet, but I'm getting way better. I cook with a ton of cilantro, and that was one of the plants I was having the hardest time with. I have that one figured out now, which is awesome, and I'm super excited about it. And I've got 8 gorgeous blue bachelor buttons blooming right now, and a couple of English daisies, and of course, all of your standard herbs or herbs that I love to cook with. The lettuce and cherry tomatoes have always done great, and things are looking really good for my wild strawberries. I am thrilled about that and would be happy to have all 27 of the plants in the garden be strawberry plants, honestly. But along the way, as my strawberry plants would die before their berries got ripe, my cilantro would turn yellow after only getting a few leaves, and my oregano would turn crispy and purple, and my moss rose would wither before its flower buds opened. I was so sad and frustrated. But I didn't try to evaluate the exact mechanism that opens the moss rosebud or alter the precise machinery that causes more cilantro leaves to emerge. Not only would that be very labor intensive and expensive, but like we talked about way back in episode 19, if your plant's leaves are brown, you don't spray paint them green and think everything's fine. You don't try to do surgery on your flower bud or soak your oregano leaves in moisturizer. Your plants are awesome. They can be trusted to flourish. You just have to do for them what you should also be doing for your awesome body, which is to provide the conditions that they were designed to thrive in. If you have a click and grow garden and want to talk plants, that would make me happy. Go to my website, healthcouragecollective.com, and click contact and send me a message. We could exchange ideas about workarounds and hacks, and that would be fun. You can certainly also contact me there about upgrading and figuring out how to actually follow your longevity plan, which is what I'm really here for. But I do love my herbs, veggies, and flowers. I have the cutest little purple chili peppers growing. So, getting your plants to flourish is all about the optimal conditions or terrain. Light, temperature, water, pests, soil, microbiome, nutrients, weeds, spacing. In my indoor garden case, it's very much about root expansion. The environment or terrain is everything. In her book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, Nasha Winters says, after years of exhaustive research and leaving no stone unturned, we have identified 10 key elements of a person's terrain that require optimization to prevent and manage cancer. The body is a complete biosphere. Comprehending the complexities of the individual's biological terrain is akin to a gardener understanding the ideal conditions for growing vegetables. It's not just a piece of land or a packet of seeds. It requires knowledge of soil biochemistry, planting requirements of all types of seeds, proper balance of nutrients, fertilizers, water, and sunlight. Also insight into pests, insects, weeds, molds, and fungi. When the body is fed a diet that provides adequate amounts of macro and micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, is exposed to a variety of microbes, and has adequate amounts of exercise, sleep, fresh water, sunlight, love, and attention, then the body flourishes. It withers with anti-nutrients, chemicals, insufficient sunshine, and too much stress. The right food is cancer's fiercest enemy." End quote. Her terrain 10, as she calls them, are genetic, epigenetic, and nutrigenomic modifications, blood sugar balance, toxic burden management, repopulating and balancing the microbiome, immune system maximization, modulation of inflammation and oxidative stress, enhancing blood circulation while inhibiting angiogenesis and metastases, establishing hormone balance, recalibrating stress levels and biorhythms, and enhancing mental and emotional well-being. Each of those 10 things could be discussed for hours. If you're interested in the full details, I highly recommend reading the book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. It's my favorite one for giving you practical advice about what to do and why. If you're interested in really diving deep, you can also check out Tripping Over the Truth by Travis Christofferson, Knockout by Suzanne Summers, Cancer as a Metabolic Disease by Thomas Seyfried, Anti-Cancer by David Savin-Schreif, Radical Remission by Kelly Turner, Keto for Cancer by Miriam Kelmian, Outside the Box Cancer Therapies by Mark Stanger, The Emperor of All Maladies by Sadie Lakesey, and maybe The Truth in Small Doses, but I have some reservations about that one by Clifton Leaf. If you are really in the thick of learning about cancer, first of all, I want you to know that you have a lot more control than you're led to believe. And secondly, I put the list of all of those books on a single page that you can just download, so you don't have to try and pause and go back and write all of them down. Just go to https://healthcourage.ck.page/cancer and download the done for you list. It has the name, the author, and a link for both Amazon and Audible, and a uber short summary about which aspect of cancer the book focuses on. No www, just healthcourage.ck.page/cancer, or click the link in the show notes. Or if you forget all of that, just go to my website, healthcouragecollective.com, and click free resources and find it there. There's so much more to talk about, so send me a message if you want to go into any specific aspect, or if you need personal attention implementing an intelligent and personal plan to prevent or survive cancer via lifestyle modifications. My intention with this episode was just to open your mind to the fact that all cancers have something in common: the ability to use anaerobic metabolism to make energy, even in the presence of oxygen. But that ability is predicated on the abundant presence of glucose. Cancer cells cannot ferment fatty acids, but healthy cells can aerobically metabolize fatty acids into the form of ketones for energy. Cancer is about how our bodies and minds interact with the environment. When our terrain is suboptimal, we can't flourish the way that we were meant to. The elements Dr. Nasha Winters goes over that increase our chances of getting cancer are overconsumption of sugar, GMO foods, modern agriculture, processed soy, grains and gluten, pesticides, antibiotics, low-fat diets, vegan diets, processed foods, nutrient deficiencies, sedentary lifestyles, and stress. Each one of those things has the potential to imbalance the terrain and affect the expression of genes that can allow cancer to grow. The most important difference between cancer cells and normal cells is how they respire. It's the single unifying theory of cancer. Even so, everyone's body is different. No two people have the same exact toxin exposure, immune system, metabolism, or microbiome. Dr. Winters says, cancer researchers today are often frustrated because they get conflicting results when it comes to uncovering the cause of cancer. Some have proven it's a virus, some a bacteria, others toxins or radiation or genetic mutations, traumas or chronic stress. All of them are correct in that any of those events can lead to mitochondrial failure, end quote. A cancer diagnosis can be the most terrifying thing that anybody can face, and it can be incredibly hard to trust yourself and your own knowledge of impaired mitochondrial respiration in cancer cells when doctors tell us that treatment needs to start immediately and to refuse would be immediate suicide. Sometimes getting started on treatment immediately is important. A lot of times, it's not. It's up to you to decide what's best for you, but I would encourage you to embrace all wisdom from both traditional and non-traditional cancer research. What I deeply believe is that wise food choices can keep cancer-promoting genes silent and mitochondria healthy, and popular food choices can do the opposite. That a great deal of the time, cancer can be treated without chemotherapy or radiation, but it's up to you to decide what's best for you. I believe that you can vastly decrease the chances you will get cancer by putting intelligent cancer prevention strategies on your aging plan. If you assess your lifestyle choices, get nutrient and genetic tests, and tend to your terrain 10, you'll be so far ahead of normal that it's not even funny. I like what Dr. Winters says in her book. One of the biggest problems with conventional cancer treatment is that it takes all the power away from the patient. That's a big deal. It's time to take your power back. I think it's possible for there to be cancer treatments that improve the health of the patient rather than decimate it. Cancer patients with healthy appetites, glowing skin, and full heads of hair, therapies that are inexpensive and even delicious and enjoyable. One of the biggest obstacles to that is actually that it's too cheap. Nobody would get obscenely wealthy from it. I don't want to end on a negative note. What am I doing? The little choices you make now can drastically reduce your chances of developing cancer in the future by keeping your mitochondria healthy. And the side effects of having healthy mitochondria are that you're far less likely to get Alzheimer's, heart disease, chronic fatigue, diabetes, obesity, and pretty much every other chronic disease there is. Healthy mitochondria give you the energy you need to go out and make a difference in the world. And the world needs the difference that only you can make. Thank you so much for being here today. Remember, if you want a reading list of 10 books about alternative approaches to cancer, click the link in the show notes or go to my website. Next week, we're going to talk about when it all gets too hard. Until then, tend to your terrain and don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.